as you probably know, Castlefield is Roman Manchester, so that rebuilt bit of Roman fort, it's not just rebuilt, that's rebuilt on exactly where we found it, the northern side of the Roman fort. So all that and all the ditches and things associated with it, they're all actually real things that we've found in the past. And what you had was over there was the Roman fort, so that's the north side of it, that's the front of it effectively. The big road came out that way, going to probably Ribchester. Another road went that way out to Wigan. And over here, what we've got is called the Vicus, which is like the civilian settlement that grows up around the fort. So the best way I like to describe it, I don't know if any of you have ever seen Catterick Garrison up in North Yorkshire, or Ripon, because they're British Army training garrisons currently, and they have been for years. And you've got a big town grows up around them, because they're full of squaddies, and the squaddies have got money, and they want to come out of the barracks and spend the money, so you get the civilian settlement grows up around it. So we get it now, and the Romans had exactly the same thing happening. The one thing that a lot of people don't get, we talk about Roman Britain, there weren't very many Romans. The Romans were just in charge, and the people here were still the same British people that were here in the Iron Age, and the same people that were there after the Romans left in about 398 AD. So they were all living in this village, but the village, the primary function of the village was to serve the Roman military in the fort. So they'd be making all sorts, they'd be making food, they'd be trading food with them, they'd be making bread, there'd be lots of metal working, iron working, lead, all that kind of thing. They'd even be making weapons for them and armour. You imagine there were 500 Roman soldiers stationed in the fort at any one time, and all of these guys would have big leather hobnail boots with like 20 hobnails in each boot, and they'd wear out, so there'd be somebody manufacturing them and selling them to all these Roman soldiers. So that was the purpose of the Vicus. So we know it extends out that way, we don't know quite how far. We know it extends that way, we got the extent of it over there on the Vicus development, on that tower block behind Beetham Tower. So we found it out there, we know how far it goes there. We're not sure yet how far it goes that way, but we may well find that with the next phase of the viaducts building, because that's, I had a meeting about that the other day. Yeah, so that's kind of the background of it. So what we were doing here, we didn't think there was going to be a massive amount of archaeology, because there was a church here and there was a graveyard in the 19th century, and we thought all of that would have got rid of a lot of the Roman stuff. When you dig around Castlefield, it's really, you find Roman stuff everywhere, but it's tiny little like keyhole bits. It's like having a jigsaw with only like 1% of the pieces and no picture. So you get these tiny bits everywhere with what we call modern intrusions, chopping through everything and getting rid of it. It's extremely rare we get a large area like this with all this archaeology in. This is probably the best archaeology I've seen in Castlefield for 25 years, I think. But because we didn't think there was going to be a lot here, we were doing a type of job called a watching brief, where these guys do their work and we just monitor it. And if something turns up, you kind of jump in and deal with it, because you don't think it's going to be very much. But Lorraine, who was doing the watching brief, gave us a ring very early on and said, hang on, I think there's a bit more here than we suspect. So me and another lad came down, and sure enough, there was a couple of ditches showing up. We thought we were right. And then eventually we realised we couldn't do this as a watching brief, because that's designed for areas where you haven't got a lot of archaeology. This we needed to do as a thing called mitigation, which is full excavation of everything, because it's just an unprecedented amount of remains. So that's where we're at now. So there's 3 tree pits, which are these big holes here. There's one there, there's a second one over there, and then you'll see a channel going between them. That's all the drainage that runs between the tree pits. There will be a third one at the other end, nearer to that building, but that's blocking off our entrance for wagons, so we can't dig that yet. So we're going to finish these probably on Wednesday next week, These guys will come back in, do all the groundworks, put the drainage in, put the trees in, they'll finish up, and then we'll come back, and we've got a couple of weeks doing all this again at the other end of the site over there. Right, so that's why we're here. What have we got? Well, I was going to say, I can't really bring you onto site, and probably good.
No, it
there's lots of things to trip over and collapse under and stuff like that. But you can see most of it through the fencing here. So the first element we've got, and this is the main bit, is the Roman road, which came out of the north gate and came out this way. So that was basically where that machine bucket is sat. That is, or was, the road. If you can see in the side of the trench here, you see that you can see like a spread of gravel in a line going along in the trench edge over there near where that hoe is leaning up. That's part of one of the Roman road surfaces. So the Romans were just really, really, really good at building and organising stuff. The Highways Agency could take a leaf out of their book for this. We were having trouble getting through that with mattocks and pickaxes. We needed the machine to lift a lot of it. And you're picking chunks of gravel up, you can shake them and they don't fall apart. It's better than tarmac. But there's actually multiple layers of road under there. So they will have built the original one when they built the first Roman fort, which was a timber and earth fort, which was built around 70 AD when the Romans first came up and pacified the northwest of England. And we know that the fort was built in about 70 AD. It was expanded in about 90 AD to be a bigger fort, and it was because they were basically using it as a base to well, as they called it, pacify the region, which reads as just kick holes out of all the tribes that lived here. We also know that the fort was abandoned in around 140 AD. That happens all across the north of England, and that coincides with the Roman invasion of Scotland. So basically they pacified all of the north by that point. They wanted to invade Scotland, so they just demanned all the forts and marched everyone right up north into Scotland. I spent about 20 years doing that, and then realised that they just didn't want Scotland anymore because there was nought there. And they came back and they re-established the fort again in 160 AD and then rebuilt it in stone in 200 AD. So you've got lots and lots and lots of different military activity, and that's mirrored in the Vicus. So you've got all this different civilian activity going on at the same time. So you can imagine this road is in use. By the time the stone fort is built, that road's been in use for 130 years by the army and all the civilians. So it had been rebuilt and repatched and repaired and resurfaced loads and loads and loads of times. And they'll have been doing maintenance on it all the time. Which is why we've got these multiple layers of Roman road. It's likely that some of the later ones are actually, they could be post-Roman. The Romans effectively left Britain in 398 AD with the British governor was a guy called Magnus Maximus, and the Roman Empire was getting a bit shaky by that time, and it had split into the Eastern and Western Empire, and Magnus Maximus got a bit big for his boots and he decided he wanted to be the emperor instead. So he took all the legions out of Britain, marched into the Western Empire in Europe, defeated somebody whose name I can't remember, and then decided he wanted to defeat the Holy Roman Empire in the Eastern Empire, and marched on Theodosius the Great and promptly got a right kicking. And that was effectively the end of Roman Britain. But you had all these people that were just Britons that had always been here, and they'd been Romanised for almost 350 years. And you know, there's the famous Monty Python thing, oh, what have the Romans ever done for us? And then they go and list a load of stuff. Well, that's quite true, because it was all a bit rubbish, and then the Romans came and everything was really good. And then they left, and then everything got really bad again. So all these guys who were hanging around in these urban centres, in these vici, and in these the bigger cities called civitas, they were all kind of wanting the Romans to come back, and they liked being Romanized people. So the settlement itself wouldn't just have gone away with the Roman fort going out of use. There'd have been people living here still after the Romans left. Manchester itself was established down there near the cathedral, but that wasn't until 914 AD when a Saxon, I suppose you might call princess, called Ethelflaed, was fighting the Vikings all over the country in a thing called the Reconquest of Britain, and she established these forts called burhs, and that is actually Manchester was a burh that was established in 914. But prior to that, all of the activity will have been here. So between the Romans going and the burh being established, you've got almost 600 years of the same kind of activity going on. All right, Britons may have been booted out and the Saxons have come in, and Manchester was part of the Danelaw for a while, so there was a lot of Vikings cruising around here as well for a while. But you've still got all these people living here because, at least for central Manchester, this is about the best place to live, because you were on a raised up bit of ground which was gravel rather than clay, so it was nice and well drained, it didn't flood all the time. It's on the confluence of two rivers, so it's easily defended and it's easy access, and so basically that's where all the people would have gravitated to actually live and put the settlements. So the Romans go away, but these guys will still have been living here, and they'll still have been using these roads. We know there's some Roman roads were carried on into use way into the medieval period, probably maybe even beyond. So this is why we've got this series of road surfaces that are one on top of the other, that are constantly being rebuilt on top of each other. Next to the road is, you're probably wondering why we've dug this giant hole. This is a roadside ditch. Most Roman roads will have had drainage ditches on either side of them. Usually they're really small. This really confused us for a while because it's massive. There's actually 3 separate ditches in there. And we couldn't really understand why the ditch was so big, but Pete, who isn't here today, he had a good idea, and I think he's probably right, because we've got a similar ditch over the other side as well. As well as digging the ditch for drainage, these guys wanted gravel because they wanted to lay down the floors of buildings and internal roads within the fort and within the vicus. So you can imagine some 2,000-year-old Roman clerk of works just saying, yeah lads, nice drainage ditch, but just keep going, I need all that gravel, keep digging it out. So you've got these 2 gigantic ditches on either side of the road, the original phase of the road, which is that one you can see in the section there. As time goes on, that fills in, it naturally fills in, and eventually it probably got purposefully backfilled. Somebody filled it in, and there was a few more ditches cut through it once it was filled in, a few more Roman pits. That's we're sorting that out at the moment, the sequence of what happened, why it happened, when it happened, and so on. And we can see in this section here, we see lots of different bands of gravel, and you'd see some of them actually go over the ditch. So it looks like the ditches have filled in, but people have still been maintaining the road, even though the drainage ditches have gone, and they've actually widened it. They've expanded the whole road over the filled in ditches. I don't know if you can see it, but on this side there's some red sandstone you can kind of see in section there. That's a curb. So at one point, one of the later points, they've actually built a curb line along the edges of the road, because the road would have had what we call an agger, so it kind of goes like that, with natural drainage on either side. So somebody's put a curb line to protect that agger, probably because perhaps later repairs or expansions of the road, they weren't quite as good as the Roman military at doing it, so you get a lot of weather and the road's eroding away. So they put a curb there to stop it all eroding and collapsing while they're using it. One of the other interesting things is there's one final phase of gravel we can see going over the top of all of it, and coming out this way. Now that confused us a bit again because the road goes that way. But I was reading some of the previous excavations. There was a guy called Barry Jones who did a lot of work over here and all around really. And he found these little side roads that were built quite late on. So you had a main road going that way to Ribchester, there was another one to Buxton, another one to Wigan over there, and the one to Wigan probably linked into the big main road to the great legionary fortress at Chester. So it looks like from the Vicus, you can imagine all these people are working, they're making stuff, you know, and they're wanting to sell it and transport it around, and they're also getting other raw materials coming in, just like we do manufacturing anything. So they're still using the roads. So they're actually building these little side roads coming off at 90 degrees to link up with all the other road systems, so they can basically get all this material out all over Britain. Which, you know, is amazing when you think, well, this is 2,000 years ago, and they're doing exactly the kind of thing that we do now. But yeah, so that's this section. So we've got these multiple roads and ditches, then filled in ditches. We've taken all the road material off here, so that where the bucket's sitting that we've been cleaning up, that's the pre-Roman ground surface. So that, the last people to walk on that were prehistoric Iron Age Britons, which is pretty cool because there's actually a relic ground surface, what we call a relict ground surface, the original ground surface beneath it, which has got a turf horizon over the top. So you're actually looking at the original turf that they probably burned off. They burn all the heather and the grass and things off before they built the road. And we've got all that as well, all that burned charcoal and stuff from underneath the road, which is pretty cool. We've had loads of Roman pot out of it, things like that as well, lots of different types of pottery, local stuff and imported stuff. Further down there, I don't know if you want to walk round. Once we get beyond the road, we're actually in the proper Vicus itself, and we've got multiple boundary ditches in there for property boundaries. But we've also got some Roman ovens that we think are lead smelters, and they're further down there where you can see that drawing board. Yeah, you can just walk behind that if you want. Yeah, so these things you can see we've dug out here are, we think there's a series of property boundaries. So these are much narrower ditches, all running in a similar direction, all at different periods. So we've got them, they all look as though they're together because we've dug them all out at the same time, but they're all done at different periods. And in the what we call the sections, the bits that are vertical, you can see lots of layers that we've scored lines in. We can use that using a thing called stratigraphy to see which ditches were there first, when they were filled in, when other ditches have cut through them. And we've got these property boundary ditches there. An interesting thing with those is all of them, right the way across, come up to where that one's partially dug out. You see it sloping down there. We've gone down to one particular layer there. There's a layer right across in all these ditches where it's full of burned charcoal, bits of ceramic building material like brick and tile, burnt door, because obviously they make wattle and door walls and things like that. And we think that was a period maybe towards the late first, early second century, when they were redoing the fort. They were also effectively doing urban regeneration, exactly like we do in the Vicus. So they probably swept away a lot of the older buildings, destroyed them, and basically chucked it all in the ditches to get rid of it. And then they're building better, more for the time, more modern buildings, exactly the same as we did, for example, in the 1960s during the Manchester slum clearances. We just knocked down all the old Victorian houses and built modern houses. That's exactly the same thing that's going on there. And we can see that in these slightly darker blackened layers where you've got all this demolition material and the ditches are filled in with it. We've got a final infilling phase where all these ditches are filled in, and fortunately you can't see it from here, but on this side we've dug most of them out anyway. So on this side we've got two big lumps of clay with loads of charcoal associated with it and certain bits of metalling. There's one there which was built on a layer of broken tile, another one just there which was built on a layer of gravel, and they look, we spotted them straight away that they look like ovens, and you can tell that the clay has been heated massively. It's been too hot for them to be bread ovens, so you have different temperatures for different types of ovens doing different things. So we don't think they're bread ovens because they wouldn't have needed the heat that we can see affecting the clay. But they don't look as though they've been hot enough to be iron smelting ovens. So a colleague of mine suggested, because he's dug a few of them, I've never seen one before, that they could be Roman lead smelters. And that makes sense. The Romans absolutely loved lead. They used it for everything. I'd make a joke that they could eat it, that they'd eat it if they could, but they actually did. Because the Romans liked nice Mediterranean salt, which is nice and white. Well, native British salt isn't. It's like a dirty brown colour. And the Romans didn't like that. So they made it white by adding powdered lead to all the salt that they were then using in cooking, which, as you well know, isn't very good. No. But they use it for lots and lots and lots of stuff. And we have had some metal detectorists came along and had a look at the spoil heap, and we have got some lead. They're not lead objects as such. You couldn't recognise them as anything, one thing or another. But they look like waste pieces of lead. You don't tend to get waste lead associated with lead smelters, whereas with iron there was loads of it and they just chucked it around, like they didn't really care. With lead they didn't. Any waste lead they'd dig back up and re-smelt because it was extremely valuable. Because I think here you basically had to mine a type of rock called fluorspar in Derbyshire, get it over here, crush it up, melt the rock down to get the lead out of it. So it was a difficult thing to do. So it was quite valuable, so you don't tend to find it. What we're intending to do, we've taken samples of all the different elements of the ovens that we've dug up, and we're going to put them through a thing called an XRF machine, X-ray fluorescence, and that'll come up with a chemical breakdown of the material we put into it. And hopefully, if they're lead smelters, we'll get really high spike of lead, effectively. But yeah, that's for later when we get back into the office. And that's basically what we've found. The other amazing thing is how shallow it is. I mean, the latest road material is only under about 300 to 400 mil of modern 19th century material. So it's kind of, as well as being really good that we've found it here, it's very good for the local planning authority, because they'll know now that anything that goes on around here, quite often what they'll do, they'll look at the depths that construction is going to and say, oh well, that's only going down 700 mil, so it's probably not going to find anything, so we won't bother looking. Whereas with this, it's like, no, you're going to need to. There's parts here where we've only got 200 mil above it, so basically anything that's done in this area, Castlefield, we think, is going to have to be looked at. We found other stuff all around here. We found an iron smelting hearth in the cellar over there, and yeah, so it's kind of, we knew all this stuff was here, but it's really good for the planners to come out and see this, because then they know exactly what we've got to do when people put in planning applications in the area. But yeah, that's basically what we're doing. I think we're here till next Wednesday, and then we're back to do the rest of that. Yeah, if anyone's got any questions.
The flats back of here.
Oh yeah.
I think when they were first built in 69,
Oh, Tonman Street.
Yeah, there was some excavation done there.
Yeah, that was one of the really good excavations. That was one of Barry's, actually, I think.
Right, there must have been a lot there though, because I mean it's so close to here.
Yeah, oh yeah, I think there was. And in fact, there, I think he found quite a lot of evidence of these boundary ditches, but he had a bit of a larger area open. Off the top of my head, I think he was finding buildings, and he was finding industrial pits and things like that. So yeah, that's one of the. There's like a handful of really major Castlefield sites, and that's one of them.
I don't think, I mean, when they built the flats, I don't think they did much with that area, but I think that had all already been developed with housing, and they had sowers and they probably all got rid of it.
Yeah, archaeology as part of the planning process has only been around since 1989 when they brought in PPG 16. So anything prior to that will have been what they call rescue digs. So it wasn't like it wasn't a planning requirement in those days. No worries.
Thank you very much.